G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff Ukraine War Update for the 13th of September 2025. I'm your host, the author David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhood Arcade, Power Games, Into the Earthbound and Erotic Tales from the Empire, Part 1 available now. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the patrons and other supporters who help make this channel possible and invite you to join them through the links in the link tree. Now, if I had more supporters, I would probably subscribe to a few news services, but that might actually be a waste of money given the lack of information out there. I try to bring you the best I can, but most of it is just more of the same. If you look at left-wing news, you get far less than you do from foreign news services. And it's scary that the majority of the news comes from outside of the, what you would call the traditional Western media. I'm not saying they aren't covering the war. I'm just saying that most of this war is hidden behind a paywall. And that seems off. I'm not calling it war profiteering. The media has to fund itself these days. The ad revenue is gone. I bet you a lot of big companies out there are going to quietly say the quiet part out loud, and that is, it wasn't ad revenue that was keeping them alive. It was political revenue, and that's drying up. You see that with CNN. And I think a lot of this fake popularity that's been going around, I think it's been going around for a long time. The rent-a-crowd movement. You've all heard about that, right? DC, I forget the name of the organisation, but they were caught job posting for rent-a-crowds, 400 for an event. Given recent events with Charlie Kirk, we're seeing walkaway double, which is a good thing. But we haven't seen any kickback to Ukraine. Now, I'm not suggesting anything, but one of the bullets did have Ciao Bella on it. Oh, sorry, Bella Ciao. Now, that's a Italian, that's a anti-fascist song. Recently was used as an anthem by people rallying in Ukraine and Poland in support of Zelensky, which is ironic given the political leanings of Zelensky's allies. See, a lot of people don't know that Zelensky doesn't have a majority party. You know, he doesn't hold the majority of the vote. He's only holding on to the presidency. He only has 12 or so representatives. He has a coalition of partners, many of whom, of course, do wear his political badge, but they aren't actual elected political allies under his leadership. They're a coalition put together. They are an extremist party. Now, they're a wackadoo mob, to say the least. But it's Ukraine's right to elect them, but it's not our right to fund them. Did you know that? It's actually against the UN Charter to fund political organizations in other countries. Somebody was talking about that, and I don't know if anybody's brought this to Trump's attention or not, but there's a good case against Soros right there. Political interference. Same with the political interference in Georgia and many other countries. That's actually an international crime. But the more we get away from the politics of the war, we get to the economics of war. and what we call the war GDP. This is where governments cook the books and justify their spending by printing money and saying, oh, but it's GDP, as if GDP is a magic genie that can produce goods and services. This is how corrupt economics has become, and banking has become. Financiers and bureaucrats control Europe right now. And they are pro-war. They gave a pro-war speech yesterday. Now, I am neither for or against Ukraine. And that's because I have no right to pick the government of Ukraine. I have no right to pick the government of Russia. Just like Russia has no right to interfere with the US election. Just like Democrats have no right to interfere with the elections in Israel, Britain, and Brazil. Yet that's exactly what they did. Obama campaigning in Israel for Netanyahu's opposition. Biden helping Keir Starmer win, and Lulu win the election. He even stood with Lulu and said how he helped Lulu win the election. Lulu's never returned his phone call since. I don't think Lulu wanted that part spoken out loud, as Lulu was in the middle of rounding up and channeling his opposition for insurrection. But that's what Ukraine did when it won the coup in 2014. They were rounding up people. They recently sent some more people to jail, allegedly for insurrection. They've jailed and tortured journalists. Yet we hear nothing from the compassionate anti-fascists. So I'm not suggesting that Charles Kirk killer had anything to do with Ukraine. I think that was just one of the things he picked as he was going through the list of recent events online, and probably saw it. Now, I don't know how he would get different research results, but it seems that search results aren't all the same. I would bet you that a lot of people right now, if they just went to Google and typed in Ukraine war, they probably wouldn't see the same results as me. And I can refresh this page a dozen times. I'll see about 4 versions, and it'll eventually cycle back to this one at random. But you'll only see about 4 or 5 versions, maybe 6. I've tried this on different days. There aren't that many variations to news stories out there. There aren't that many news outlets out there. But if I type in anti-fascism, I bet you how many of you know that the anti-fascists are lying about their history. They were not started in Germany after the war. They were started in Spain before the war by Stalin. And during the war, they wore the black Hugo Boss uniform. And this is before the war, and became German secret police. Many of them were party officials. After the war, they were collaborators, because most of them fled to East Germany and became Stasi. And after the war, Stasi fled, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, most of the Stasi fled to and worked for German intelligence. And then suddenly Antifa reappeared in new buildings that they couldn't afford. It was all creations. All of these political organizations after World War II were cutouts of various intelligence services. Lee Harvey Oswald worked for the anti-communists, the anti-Castro League, the New Orleans Mafia, and the CIA, and the FBI. Guess he was getting around. And somewhere along the lines, he was spared some time to try and join the Communist League with Mexico, but they wouldn't have him because they knew because they suspected he was CIA. Actually, I don't think he was working for the CIA at the time. I think that's later. But timelines all jumbled up with that little mess. But when you look at the Ukraine war, you often see targeted attacks. And often you'll hear Zelensky complain about ruthless attacks, his favourite word. Ruthless! Ruthless, I tell you. Six days, they even repeat stories. But remember, Russia's the one who targets energy facilities, yet the headlines say drone attacks on Russian oil facilities. They gaslighting you. And most people, unless they're really interested in the war, unless they're taking it all in and trying to jumble it all, are going to miss a lot of things. So I try to filter out the irrelevant stuff because they repeat stories, sometimes 2 to 3 times a day, sometimes every couple of days. No, sometimes they'll rate the same story for days. Key events, most of them are bullshit. Yes, there were attacks. Yes, there were drones. Yes, people died. But we can't... Now, they're saying industry sources. Russian media. They won't even say Russian media reported these attacks. Okay, they won't give credit where credit's due. They won't call out Ukraine for their hypocrisy. Again, it does sort of lean into the fact that they'll comment and use adjectives when it comes to Russians, but they won't use the same adjectives when it comes to the same actions by Ukraine. Isn't it amazing? A number, what? May have been. May. That's a weasel word. Oh, we didn't say there were 21. We just thought there might, maybe, could have been. You might as well say it could have been 200. So actually, so far they've only produced the fragments of 2 separate drones. And they're saying they attacked these drones after they left. So, wait a minute. So you're saying a drone with 700 miles range flew all across Ukraine, into Poland, and turned around, and we're headed towards where? A drone, smaller than a man, somehow had battery power that would last, well, maybe, what do they do? Remember, the bigger the object, the proportionally more energy it uses. It's not like, hey, 2 mobile phones, 2 screens. Okay, there's no screens, but still, it's control flight computer, etc. It's the size of a mobile phone, so pretty much presume, okay, it might have 24 hours battery. That's just the flight computer, to receive. But don't forget, it's sending and receiving all the time to location data. Or is it using some sort of inertial guidance? Either way, it's using more energy than your mobile phone. Most likely inertial guidance if it's going a long way, because it'll be cut off from radio signals once it gets... It only has to go 42 miles to be over the horizon. Although it is at a higher altitude, so that increases its range, signal range. But still, 700 miles, it's definitely well out of signal range from line of sight from its launch point. Do the maths. These drones have been only reported as having a 70-mile range on a one-way trip. They keep telling us that these Shahad drones are going all over Ukraine. They're not. They're air-launched. Now, I don't know how. I haven't seen. But clearly, something is carrying them to a launching point where they launch from. Probably a missile. If I was to hazard a guess, that the missile flies over and then breaks up or breaks open and these drones keep on flying. I mean, a missile with a couple of drones would be much lighter than a missile with a large warhead and harder to shoot down because it doesn't have to come down at a low altitude. It can fly up to the city and break up and then launch the drones in separate directions. We don't know because there's no transparency on the technology being used currently in Ukraine or against Ukraine. Kids in World War II could pick up a newspaper and see the latest German bomber on display. Crashed, of course, shut down, but still. They could see pictures of German tanks. We can't see pictures of... We get a picture of a Polish tank the other day, and it was in Poland. A T-54 or whatever, training tank, being passed off as a Ukrainian. Now, it might have been training Ukrainians. But they said somewhere in Ukraine, and it was Poland on the image search. You look up explosions in Ukraine, and you usually get we hit this. You look at all the explosions we hit, and they're all in Russia. The media is lying to us in real time. Google is lying to us in real time. DuckDuckGo is powered by Microsoft. DuckDuckGo may not track you, but it doesn't mean the information given to you is reliable because it comes from Microsoft. Back when we had Lycros and Jeeves and a real Yahoo, not the former shell of Yahoo taken over by liberal fanatics, but back when Yahoo was Yahoo, the media were competitive, desperate, and open to give you information. We knew the names of Taliban leaders. We knew where fighting was in various parts of Afghanistan. We can get some information on the breakup of the Ukrainian and Russian army, makeup of the Russian army, and it means nothing that what's reported in Al Jazeera or anywhere else. It's not as big. Drone attacks. They only report one side. They only report that there were drone attacks by Russia. And then they say, oh yeah, Russia shot down these drones. Most of the time, most of the drones sent to Russia are shut down. So there's nothing to report there. NATO Secretary General is only NATO Secretary General because he refused to step down as Prime Minister of the Netherlands. EU refused to do anything about him. Zelensky's talking about post-war guarantees on paper. Well, where's your meeting with Putin then? And I brought it up yesterday, but I'll repeat today. Until Zelensky, Ukraine was a Chinese ally. China was supposed to be the one to provide security guarantees and prevent the Russian invasion should in return for giving up nuclear weapons. Not the United States. Europe was supposed to guarantee that they wouldn't invade Ukraine. They held a coup there. That's pretty much the same thing, interfering with the... That's still a violation of national security and national sovereignty. So, You broke the agreement first by holding a coup in 2014. That's on Obama. Now, sanctions are going to be increased. They're discussing what sanctions. Ursula von der Leyen didn't say the possibility of sanctions. She spoke about 37 times she brought up Ukraine and sanctions. Not just tariffs, not just sanctions, individuals banned, barred for life, Russian cultural exchanges, etc., barred, expanding them to other countries, apparently trying to force down the price of Russian oil, which of course is only benefiting India, who's the biggest reseller of Russian oil, so they can buy it cheaper and sell it for more, and they say, oh, this is to starve Putin's war machine. But China's selling Russian. That just means China gets more gas and oil in return for raw materials. This is pointless virtue signaling. Europe, however, has tried to get other countries to phase out, replacing with US liquefied gas. The two have a different compression ratio, which means you have to replace valves, you have to reprogram all the flow systems, because liquefied natural gas is denser than Russian gas. It's not just denser; it has a different viscosity. So it also apparently has to you have to use different pipes because you have chemical reactivity in the seals. You have to worry about the seals because with liquefied natural gas, you have to keep it under pressure before in transport, and you have different mechanisms for converting the gas into flame. Liquefied gas has to be dropleted, which uses a different mechanism for distribution in a gas heater environment. And recently, I forget who, there was a company brought out a compressed gas turbine. I'm not sure if this was in Japan or Korea. This compressed gas turbine. I think this is a huge breakthrough in electric motors. It's like 30 kilograms. 2.2 pounds to the kilo, I think. Basically, you know how heavy an engine is, right? Well, imagine an engine that I can lift 30 kilograms. Most people out there who are adults in good health can lift 30 kilograms. Yet it produces more power than Tesla's current electric engine. And this is a liquefied gas engine. And most of you don't know out there, one of the reasons why Tesla was such a good seller is because it had a powerful engine. Because most electric cars were weak. So a gas engine with that's a turbine. So as the gas decompresses, it turns a turbine. The turbine is ignited. The gas is ignited, which causes rapid. Basically, you now have a Batman jet engine in your car. If anybody remembers, the original Batman engine was a gas turbine, which was considered. The reason why they did that is because back then a gas turbine engine was cutting-edge technology. Which, by the way, is the gas turbine engine is what they use in an Abrams tank. And that engine weighs hundreds of pounds. Could you imagine replacing it with, well, plus it's, imagine replacing that gas turbine engine with something that weighs far less. I bet you if you asked, they would want more ammunition, but yeah, a lighter Abrams tank, because one of the reasons why the Abrams hasn't been further deployed in the Ukraine is because it's too heavy. Okay, that's why they stripped down the M1. It could barely operate in Ukraine. Donald Trump has already sent many different weapon systems to Ukraine, despite all the criticism. This is the problem. Nothing he does is either good enough and that's the politics of constant criticism, particularly Zelensky, who's constantly trying to leverage his country's relationship with China against Russia, because he is desperately. You hate that which you love the most. That is Zelensky. I forget when if you just so in love with something and you either refuted or rebutted or rejected, but for some reason, Zelensky says Russia will never attack us. Blah blah blah. It's our sovereignty, it's our right, blah, blah, blah. All this blah, blah, blah that Zelensky has done has been ignored. Not just by Marco Rubio, Turkey. Everybody's pretending that 2022, everything before that never happened. And that's a problem. Now, the Russian economy has cut its interest rates as growth has slowed. Again, I said the other day, according to economists, without the sanctions, Russia's economy would be sitting around 5.5%. With sanctions, their growth has slowed to 3.5%, but it's still growing. They're on track to get rid of the debts within a decade, although Putin has already hinted that he probably won't be in office by then. I mean, the men would be... There are different conversations about Putin's age, so let's just say, if he wants this to be his last term, I would suggest that he ends this term this year on good terms. And, however, Russia says the peace talks were on pause because of NATO. They don't want to talk. That's a problem. But they always, let us silence. Well, again, Harry and his interference, everybody wants a chunk of Ukraine. That's BlackRock, Blackstone, a lot of black-hearted businesses. But when they call a war an investment opportunity, that's when the government should have stepped in and said, right, we're holding some war crime trials. But here we have Russia's expanded a little bit its buffer zone north of Sumy. This, of course, is the result of weeks of fighting, off and on. Nothing here to report. Nothing substantial has happened, though there's fighting here in the north. Fighting around Kupiansk's main street still continues. As you can see, they fight off and on in the center of Kupiansk. This is Kupiansk to here. This is Koroninski up to from here to here. And there's fighting on the outskirts of Koroninska. Alright. Fighting here. Nothing's ever come of it. Although, this time there's a little bit of advance. But still. But it's open fields. Alright, so fighting's resumed here. Fighting across the Lyman front continues. Russia's allegedly fighting. See, a lot of these towns have similar names, but you have to look at the Ukrainian name and you actually see the variations in the letters. This allegedly was taken by Russia. It's not marked off. This hasn't also been marked off, but there's fighting in, and there's reported fighting here, and there's reported fighting here. Russia's never been able to push the Ukrainians further back past this street. Zakhin is apparently not as small as it appears to be, although there's Dusky. You had this line. This is where Zakhin is all up to here, all this, and I think this is up to here, and then you have no markers. So by Ukrainians' definition, I think it's all the way up to here, and then you get linemen, which is this area around here. That's lineman, that's lineman. So that's the outskirts. That's lineman's big, but behind it is even bigger. Silversk, Donetsky, Kremovsk, but Solivansk would be a big blow to Ukraine. Now, between Lyman and this line here, and this line here, is alleged to be 20% of Ukrainians' GDP, which I can understand why Zelensky doesn't want to lose it, and why Russia keeps shutting it down, forcing. However, there's been very little activity here. The activity here is continued fighting against the fierce front. Ukraine is learning that while land resistance is working, they can't not engage, right? They can't. You got a front, you can't have it jagged, okay? But you can't not engage. So they've got to be able to engage the Russians, but not stay within the firing line, but not retreat too far back. So they're using basically trench lines, drones, anything they can right now. And Russia, because they're spread so thin in other areas, and that's simply because Russia is only using 20% of its manned forces. It could double its troops tomorrow, but as you can see, they're engaged elsewhere in large offensives, so they're not going to spare men and equipment for a town I don't think they want. I think they just want to attack it. Same here. There's a tactic in negotiations, and I think that's what they're doing right now. Pressure to bear, and both sides are doing it, but obviously Russia is bringing pressure to bear on Ukraine. If they really wanted this town, they would be holding the lines here and just going smash. But again, it's about casualties. It's about what's it called? A slow victory, if it makes sense to you. If it doesn't, it's hard to explain, but a slow victory forces your enemy to retreat, whereas a fast victory eliminates your enemy. And for some reason, Russia wants a slow victory rather than a fast victory. Yes, they could probably destroy Ukraine, but they don't want a fast victory. So they are maintaining a delicate balance based on politics, psychology, and feedback from battlefield commanders on exactly how much force they need in any given area to force the Ukrainians back. But in many areas like Provozk, that isn't working. Now, we've seen this before in many battles where you'll have a siege of a town, or where they'll hold out for months, weeks, or sometimes years, and the enemy never pushes hard enough to quite destroy them. But all of a sudden, one day, the town will just be cleared, and this is what Russia's hoping for. They have had it happen, but most of the time these battles do end up results in wearing out the Ukrainians and having them retreat to consolidate elsewhere. But Ukraine, as I said, Ukraine in some areas are consolidating their troops and holding on, such as the towns here. They might lose. They've lost it before, but they've taken it back. But they may lose it again. This is, I think, the last. I'm not sure. There's many other offensives. Ukraine's had a few offensives that have worked, but they never seem to last long. This is one of the longest lasting ones. The longest lasting one, of course, is pushing the Russian forces back from Kiev and Sumy and Kharkiv. All of this, remember? So Russia was, of course, successfully halted and pushed out of Kherson, which, of course, has emboldened the Ukrainians. But the Russian envoy to the UN, of course, has complained or pointed out, depending on your point of view, that Zelensky, of course, is unpopular and is using the war as a tool of political survival. That the root causes, stable solutions, and other words like that are common. And, of course, the Russians point to the European capitals as the problem as they continue to supply arms and military equipment and military aid, of course, intelligence, and the encouragement to continue killing yourself so that they can feel better about themselves because they get to pick up the pieces. What, you think Russia's going to foot the bill? Ha! They're not going to. You're never going to see. Russia may lose money, but they're going to destroy everything they can before in Ukraine and then say, oh no, you may steal that 200 billion of ours, but it's a drop in the ocean. You know, we destroyed $1 trillion. We destroyed $1 trillion of your industry in Ukraine, which is why I think Europe is so salty and refuses to end the war, by the way. But Merz, on the other hand, is Merkel 2.0. He's politically motivated. He wants to prove that Germany is He wants to prove that Germany is not a footstool for France by carrying out French ambition against Russia. Way to go, Germany. But the German opposition actually wants a peaceful Germany and good relationships with Poland, etc. And Russia. Germany has long sought peaceful relationships with all its neighbours. But the West German governments have often been handpicked to do the bidding of the Allies, not to represent the interests of Germany. And that's why you get Ursula always lying, who's a two-faced warmonger who talks in public about peace and then in speeches to MEPs repeats over and over again how she wants to sell out the farmers of Europe and give in to the Greens, Gaza, the refugees. And then she talks about conspiracy theorists who act on behalf of Putin. Putin, I tell you. Even though all her assessments about Moscow are baseless, they're just Hillary Clinton talking points. But are you surprised from a person who's mentioned over and over again that she wants a fair and just peace? She echoes everything Zelensky says about an end to the Ukraine war without clarifying. So you have to go not to the speeches of Ursula, but to the speeches of Zelensky and his interviews to find out whether fair and what actually Zelensky wants. But she is pushing his party line, not the party line of the people who elected her. Though you could argue she is, because she was elected by the bureaucrats, not by the people. This is a repeat story. But 6 months ago, Russia brought out a new version of the T-90. Now, after a few months of the battlefield testing, it was taken back. And anybody who's looking up the picture of the T-90 will notice it doesn't look like this. Yes, that's a desert camouflage. Yes, it was going to be. Yes, it was made for export to Syria. And, of course, as you know what happened there, and those orders were cancelled. You'll notice that it has a new turret gun, a bigger vision, its cameras are bigger, it's got more plates, got more proactive armor on its skirt. It's got a bigger driver hatch. It's got a secondary hatch, which I think is for the. It's got an observer, so you got driver. You got observers for the driver. I think that's actually got the commander and gunner. It's back to the three-man crew. I think they've got back with the exterior secondary tank to extend its range, which it uses, which is weird. We're calling it a secondary tank when it actually drains first. But yeah, the Russian army has reconfigured the T-90 to pretty much the same configuration as it was displayed back in February, but this time, well, it was put on display in all green, in desert colours. It's been repainted all green. You can see that T-90 shell with the cylindric system, and of course the assault tank, which is basically a armoured bulldozer. Now, it has a backhoe, by the way, there's a backhoe attachment to dig trenches. Now, it was originally for export to replace the T-80. Now, it has digital fire control, updated, and if you don't think that any of the equipment that you sent to Ukraine that has been captured, or Afghanistan that's been captured or left behind, hasn't gone into this tank, you're a muppet. But here's the thing. Showing a T-90 on a rugged road, muddy, it's not bogged. One of the problems with the T-90 was its weight. Have they reduced its armour? And of course this has been a common problem with a lot of Russian tanks since the 50s. A lot of their tanks, instead of having the 20mm as specified, it only had the 15mm thickness, and in some areas 10. Some areas it didn't have it had a hardened steel instead of the composite materials. Now, I always thought the composite materials weighed less. No, that turned out to be not so, particularly with the I know it sounds strange, aluminate alloys, but a lot of the aluminum alloys use the flexibility, like they have hardly any aluminum in them, but when you add, it's shared tensile strength, right? The aluminum shares its properties with the atoms around it, and the atoms around it share its properties with the aluminum, so they become a harder composite material. And of course the titanium, of course, massively increases the weight. The aluminum's there to provide bonding and lighten the material. Plus, you can't have titanium on its own. There's a lot of metals you can't have on its own, like copper. Copper works better when it's and a lot of people don't know this. Copper and gold. Though this tank apparently has optical connections, that is, so The cameras use optical fiber, not digital, though they are digital cameras for digital processing. But it has advanced optics. Guarantee those came out of the I know I'm talking about Timu. I'm talking about these optics came from the equipment that was recently captured. Same with the fire control. I bet you they've got now multi-layered armor for RPGs, anti-tanks, and drones. As you can see, the cope cage, basically the cope cage, but also we go back here, we see the plates. Sacrificial lambs. You've got the grills, the most common points where they hit the grills to cause explosions. The plates, they're ceramic, so they crack and spread the shock wave. They're also made to be replaced, and of course, if the pressures are enough, you have a blowout, which would destroy your RPG. First time around, a second, but of course, Russia has, of course, told the whole world how they defeat armor. So everybody's starting to put together an anti-tank system. I think Poland, Germany will soon come out with a new two-shot anti-tank system. Now, the Americans are working on and had a striker under construction to use shockwave systems. Now, I don't know how they generate shockwave. My guess is that it used a subsonic system to create a subsonic shockwave to try and disrupt guidance, but it didn't work against RPGs. It only worked against guidance systems, apparently, allegedly. There's also talk of battlefield lasers. Recently, China's battlefield lasers have proven to be ineffective, which is why you have seen battlefield lasers withdrawn, except for guidance systems by both sides. Both sides, the power consumption just makes them a huge glowing target. Though they are effective in some scenarios, it's like a tank versus a drone. The machine gun on the back might take out a few drones. But if I swarm you with more than 8, my drones are going to get through. Which is why you see drone attacks in the hundreds all the time. Because there's no air defense, even missile defense and gun defense. And of course, you look at the cost of lasers. Lasers are not a force multiplier, right? This is for the cost of one laser, you can have 10 anti-aircraft guns. And if the anti-aircraft guns are just as effective, why would you have the laser weapon? When the laser weapon is a big glowing thing that you can see from far away, quite literally on the infrared scope, because it's just that big a glow in the dark. You don't need to see the laser, you can see its heat. And apparently also, after repeated firing, the air around the laser is so heated up that it actually blinds the optical tracking systems. Because a lot of radar systems, a lot of drones are too small to be tracked by radar, or they're too close to be tracked by radar, I should say. It is, of course, the long range. They are using multi-tracking systems, so that's neither here nor there. You can overcome atmospheric lensing and other issues, but again, it's a matter of energy, and when you're spending half your energy on cooling the laser because it has an operating temperature range, and then you've got to cool the computer system and all the other things, you might as well say, shit, just give me a couple of miniguns. Because one minigun costs, what, $1,000 plus the $1,000 per minute or something in ammunition. Now, laser, of course, is quite different. But, of course, now we're looking at the microwave emissions, and they're basically way more effective than anything else. The tactical battlefield systems, particularly in the Abrams, which allegedly have been captured by Russia, have proven that most of the reason why you've only seen a few, yes, some of the Abrams have been struck, but only a few, is because their battlefield system is quite effective against guided drones. Most of the tanks have either been hit by artillery or optical guided drones taking out as you can see, the tracks in the exposed area, because when the track snaps right at this point here and jams up in there, that's why they have the elongated skirt, so it can be lifted and retract. That actually is a hinge there, but you basically got a short exposure time, and it's the same with one of the things Russia has put into testing and does not appear to be further increasing their expenditure on is the North Korean 170mm system. Now, it's good at long-range pounding of when you want to pound an area. But when it comes to precision artillery, the Russians are relying on the Mask B, which they have more experience with the 153. The 153 shell costs a third of the price. It's guidable, where the 170 is unstable. It has a higher precision hit rate. Guided munitions is expensive. And 170 is just too unreliable. Now, yet, if you have a lot of them and pound an area, but what you need is amassed armies, which neither side has done. Neither side will amass armies or tanks, because if you do, they're going to be a target. Now, one of the reasons why Russia's done so well is the ability for them to see so much of Ukraine in real time and be able to hit Ukrainians whenever they try to mass. That was why they have never taken out Zelensky and have no intention. He's Ukraine's worst enemy. He has driven Ukraine to the point of desperation. He's driven Ukraine to the point of self-destruction. And even if Russia was forced to withdraw, they will not be forced to withdraw far. Russia can't be forced out of most of this area. They'll probably be able to be forced to give up a little bit, but I think they will not give up much more. And they will definitely, I'm not saying that Russia will prevail everywhere or in everything, but the longer Russia gets to stay in this position, if they get, they get to hear every week, is it? Oh, no, well, sorry, every month on average, 1%. That's 1%, give or take, that Ukraine won't get back. So another month of war is going to see this 20%, 19, 18. We don't know. There could be a breakthrough tomorrow. Zelensky is trying to target. Russia has hundreds of oil depots spread all over Russia. Pardon me. Sooner or later, unless they find a way to break through Russian air defenses, I say sooner or later, we're going to see pictures of these cities come out, and they're going to not just be piles of rubble. I think, although most of Russia, most of these buildings, they're empty shells. Look at them. They're empty shells. This is the reality of Ukraine. They're empty shells. Burnt out streets full of burnt out cars, roads. Most of these roads around all this, burnt out cars. Most of these fields are full of landmines. The only reason why Russia's not advancing far and fast is landmines. Ursula's made it clear, but she is a European bureaucrat, and I think pressure from Trump will be brought to bear if the people out there start making videos like this go viral. Start making the truth go viral. The truth will set you free. And there will be a compromise. Neither Russia nor Ukraine will get what they want, said President Trump. Russia might get some of what it wants, but not all of it. My guess is, sooner or later, Trump will put the hammer down, grab the map and a marker, and go, zoink. That's yours. This side's yours. This side's Russia. This side's Ukraine, and bonk both of their heads together and say, Vance, put a pen in their hands, and that's it. It's over. Sooner or later, if enough people make these videos go viral, if enough people will speak out and say, enough. If you like Ukraine, you should want an end to the Ukraine war. You should not care what happens on the Russian side of the front line, because the people in that area are not pro-Ukrainian, are not Ukrainian. They're not Russian colonizers. They're Russians, and they were there before Ukraine existed. And if people just took the time to stop turning up the temperature because they want to get their way, we might actually achieve some lasting peace. And thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and please support the channel. You can support me on Patreon. You can buy my books. You can buy my merch. All my links are in the link tree, which you see on the screen. You can find it in my profile, the description below, depending on which platform you're on, or scan the QR code on the screen. Thank you for your time. I appreciate each and every one of you. And as I said, YouTube has screwed the pooch. They want, doesn't matter how many of you watch my channel, watch time is great, but I need subscribers to unlock advertising, because if you want more news, better news, I have to have lots of subscribers, and I have to have revenue so that I can afford the subscription services, because news, particularly detailed news, is not free. But I can bring you my analysis without showing it to you, of course, not to violate copyright. So, thank you for watching. Please help me out, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.